Hey, Revenue Radio. I'm Mary Grothe, founder and CEO at House of Revenue. And today we are going to talk about how RevOps can help you scale your company. And this is a topic so near and dear to my heart. Well, they all are. I think I say that on every episode I get to run. I love revenue. It's weird, but I love revenue. Okay. Let's talk about RevOps. This has been such an amazing journey diving in and being a RevOps partner to the small business community. We first embarked on RevOps at the end of 2019. I remember sitting with a HubSpot employee out here in Denver at a Starbucks talking about, what do you think RevOps is? I don't know. What do you think RevOps is? How would you define it? How would you define it? And it was such a fun conversation, just exploring what RevOps was going to mean to the business community. And for us, knowing that we focus on that second stage scale, so they've made it through startup scale, a few million in revenue, but then they're looking at growing from there. RevOps is a key critical component. So we have had the luxury of building revenue engines for the last couple of years. And I'm excited to talk to you today about how you can leverage RevOps to scale your company by building a powerful revenue engine. So this specific topic is going to be a little bit more in the weeds today. So grab your notebook, write it down, or if this one is too detailed for you, just toss it over the fence to your revenue leaders or your revenue team. And hopefully there are some good takeaways for you. Well, let's talk about the revenue engine. The first thing that I like to do is audit what you already have. And that's a great starting place, right? But it takes a lot of time and energy and several conversations and a deep analysis to truly understand how your revenue engine is performing today. So when I look at RevOps, I think about not just the technology, but the people and the processes and how you're aligning their behaviors and their processes and the technology to the way your buyer buys and the way that your customer needs to be supported. So let's first envision the bow tie funnel. On the first half of the funnel is everything for marketing and sales. So that's going to be awareness, consideration, decision stage. Right there in the middle, you have the purchase step and they go into onboarding. And then on the other side of the funnel, you have implementation, onboarding to get to adoption. Then you have retention, expansion, and advocacy. So a great revenue engine ties all of this together. FYI, I know I said marketing on the front end. Marketing never leaves the process. There's a sales component, there's a customer success component, but marketing should exist all the way throughout, which turns it into that flywheel that HubSpot is known for. Okay, so that's the bow tie funnel. So how do you audit your environment? Well, you need to, one, list out all the technologies that you have. Have you ever done a cost per user for all of your tech stack? It's actually quite eye-opening. So sit down with the team, make sure you go through your accounting software so you're finding every little monthly bill that you have for every piece of technology, because you might just look at your CRM and the bigger tools and say, oh, we use HubSpot and we use PandaDoc. Okay, great. But you might want to talk to your team because there's a chance that you actually work with a lot of other technologies, because as you grow, your marketing team's going to say, oh, we need SEMrush, we need Moz. Oh, we've got a drop-in blog, WordPress connector for a blog, that's $49 a month. Oh, we have SpyFu. Oh, we have, whatever it is that they have on the back end. So you want to make sure that you're really understanding everything you have. You'll also look at the tools that power your revenue teams. So tools like Zoom or Microsoft, whatever you're using for web conferencing, you will want to look at the whole setup to understand what the tech stack is costing you and if it's efficient. You'll also look at communication tools like Slack or Teams or whatever you're using to communicate. Maybe it's Google Chat and part of your Google Workspace there. But regardless, get an understanding of all the technology that you have, because there is so much overlap now between these technologies. So it will be great to list them all out and then also identify how many users you have, the level of subscription that you've signed on for, how many seats you paid for, how many are used, unused, and then also the cost per seat if you want to add additional seats inside of your contract, and then the contract terms. Is this a 1 year, 2 year, 3 year contract? Is it month to month? And the payment terms. That way you can get a cost and you can identify, you could look then after you add it all up and say the sales team, their tech stack costs $400 per user per month. And then you can look at the marketing team and say, hey, for our marketing stack, that's costing us, $389 per user per month, whatever it is. But it gives you a good understanding of what those costs are. So the first step I like to follow is to lay out everything you're already spending money on. I will say there's usually low-hanging fruit here to clean up your billing. You may have overlap and functionality between two systems. You may have something a former revenue leader purchased, but no one's really using. It hasn't been built out. You might have some salespeople who have LinkedIn Premium. Some might have Sales Navigator, but you've never really made a full decision on let's get the whole team Sales Navigator to where you can get better license structure there and per user costs. So you want to take a look at what is in your tech stack, what you're spending money on and where there might be overlap and what it's costing. That's step number one. Step number two is then to dig in and understand how each team member is currently using the tech stack. Sound tedious? Yes. Worth it? Yes. You want to sit down and have them walk through if they're a power user, if they're a mediocre user, if they're anti-CRM and automation and not using it, if there's adoption problems, if you have a training gap, you've got to understand how the technology is being used today, just to get a baseline, get that benchmark of how the team is using each of those pieces and report back on that. We love using a green, yellow, red color coding system. It's a little bit easier. Your power users or your strong adopters, they're going to be green. Middle of the road's going to be yellow, and the problem children will then be red. But make sure you get the feedback because it could be very real as to why they don't want to use it. So oftentimes when we audit tech stacks and we get to the point where we're talking to people who have to use the tech stack, well, we hear a lot of mixed feedback. We hear horror stories about past CRM implementations where the time was not taken to clean up the data fields from a former revenue leader or a way we used to do things. And then there's inconsistencies on the way lead sources are being tracked. There's a CRM with all these fields and people will say, oh, so-and-so used to require us to track this. It's a field still there. It's no longer required, but it's on this contact record. So some people fill it out. Some people don't. It's like, well, what are we doing with the data? I don't know if we're doing anything with the data. Then why do we have the field? I don't know why we have the field. And so it causes confusion. There's so much value in having the conversations with the people who use the technology. And this process takes time. But if you want to leverage RevOps for the long term and scale your company, you've got to fix the engine. Data is key. You've got to have the data. It'll help you with data-informed decisions. It's going to help you, trust me, tenfold in the future. Okay, so you audited your tech stack, you listed it out, then you talk to people. Now you need to grab a whiteboard, my favorite, and you're going to map out the way your buyer buys and the way your customer needs to be supported and how they want to be engaged in the second half of that bow tie funnel through their life cycle. Now, this is a great opportunity to do some voice of the customer surveys, to ask about the experience of what it was like to make a purchase decision with your company and also understand what it's like to be a customer of your company. This is a great opportunity. You just went and you spoke to everybody in your revenue teams. Why are you not talking to your customers? You should also, if you feel up to it, do a little competitive analysis. Maybe you can do some secret shopping and see the way other funnels are set up. You could also, with a newer customer who's come on board, maybe they came to your service from a competitor, you can incentivize them and have a great conversation to figure out what their service was like or what their onboarding process was like versus yours. There's an opportunity for you to have some great conversations to identify where you can make some great improvements, and that'll reduce friction in the sales process as well as in the customer life cycle, retaining them, expanding revenue, and of course, reaching that point of advocacy. So I like the whiteboard because I like to look at how data flows and how the customer flows and that entire life cycle and the buyer's journey and the customer's journey. Because I want to identify what does the buyer want in their buying journey and what does the customer want in their customer journey. And when we can map that out and we can identify what the steps and stages are, we can then start to build processes. Then we can evaluate if your current tech stack can meet the needs of the processes that you need, but then also align with the behaviors of your different revenue team members. And so you can identify, does our current marketing tech stack meet the need if we are going to shift our go-to-market and do more with webinars or events, as an example? Are you able to track campaign level detail inside of your marketing hub or automation tied to your CRM? You'll want to evaluate with what you want to do in the go-to-market and how you want to attract customers to the brand. Does it align with the way your marketers work, and does it align with the way that your tech stack needs to perform in order to get those results? So you'll do that same exercise, marketing, sales, through the funnel, into onboarding, implementation, CS. Okay, you get the point. So let me give you a couple of specific examples of where this is beneficial. I recently started working with a company, and we were able to dig into their HubSpot and evaluate the automation and the steps and stages of the process. So the former revenue leader did a good job building out processes. But when I stepped in there and started digging into it, I immediately found areas of weakness. And so I met with the sales team, and I asked them, actually met with sales and head of implementation, and then also the person running operations, and went through and said, talk to me about the life cycle of the customer. Just kidding. I also met with marketing to talk to me about the life cycle of the customer. And I evaluated everything we were doing for top of funnel and how we were attracting people in. There was opportunity inside of HubSpot to not only clean up the data fields on each of the contact records, but also to streamline how we were tracking referral partners and what we call COIs, or centers of influence. So there wasn't a contact record type for the COIs. And so there was a constant battle, I say that like, wasn't like heated battle, but there was lack of clarity for the sales team on where deals were coming from and who was referring them and who owned which referral partner, et cetera. And so there's a huge opportunity inside of HubSpot to add in those COIs and to put together an SOP, a standard operating procedure, on how those are entered into the system and how we keep data integrity and avoid adding duplicates and make sure that whoever has ownership of that COI and we can track it. Okay, so we were looking through these things, and then we got to the part where there's a decision step, they make a purchase, and there's a handoff that goes from sales to operations or to the implementation team. And they currently have a process that's pulling data out of completed fields, and it's sending a notification to the implementation team in the form of an email. And it has these data fields. But when we looked at the output, it's kind of a mess. It has like no formatting, and it's pulling from all these random redundant fields. I'm like, well, this is going to take a lot of time for an implementation person to read through this mess. Yeah, in theory, like all the data is there, but this is not easy to read. And you almost need like to print it out and use a ruler to go through it because all the lines are running together. And so it's super confusing. And I thought this needs to be completely reimagined. Then the process after that was that email was generated. It was then a manual process for the implementation team to take the information and enter it into a spreadsheet. And they were manually updating when a new client was going to be assigned. And then they have tight SLAs, 48 hours for this, 48 hours for this step, 48 hours for this step. But there was no communication back to the sales team, and there's no visibility because this is an internally owned spreadsheet by the implementation team. Like, well, that's a problem because then the sales team has no visibility to know, was their deal accepted? Has it been assigned? Has a welcome email been sent, et cetera? And so we are like, we've got to break down these walls. We got to build all this out in HubSpot. We need to get rid of this spreadsheet. We need to create this in a queue inside of Service Hub. And so we were able to start reimagining what that process looked like. We also uncovered that they had a project management tool that they were using in one part of the organization, and it's beautifully integrated with HubSpot. And we're like, well, why don't we extend that into the implementation process and get away from this spreadsheet? And then it's integrated within HubSpot. So every time a stage is updated, it can automatically update in HubSpot and notify the salesperson. It's beautiful. So we were able to look through that process and say, here's how we're going to reimagine this. But then as they go into service, there's an opportunity for upsell on these clients. So they are a land and expand. They can sell a core service, and then there's a plethora of ancillary modules and technology services that they can sell. But unfortunately, they were not tracking that in any automated way. So the inside sales team, who is responsible for servicing the existing clients, they did not know what products they had or didn't have. So they are blindly enrolling them in campaigns. It's more of like a mess. Hey, anybody who's interested in this other ancillary technology, but there was no knowledge whether they had it or not. And so we went back back to the front end of HubSpot and said, okay, on the contact record, then we need to add product fields, either a checkbox or a yes or no field to say they have this product or they don't. They have this service or they don't. That way, by the time the deal gets submitted and it gets through implementation and onboarding, now the sales team has an opportunity to run a report to say, who are all of our clients that don't have this specific product? Boom, you have a report. Boom, you can create a campaign. Boom, marketing can do an email. Boom, you can hold a webinar and you have an invite list. It just brings so much clarity into the process. This is just one example of how RevOps can be used in order to scale your organization. I know it was a little bit in the weeds today, but I hope this was beneficial for you.